And I'm realizing now, having children, small children, and feeling quite hopeless about many things in the world and feeling incapable of knowing how to deal with the brutal polarization and aggressive climate of discourse, for example. I completely understand the need to scream and be fucking angry. I get it. But for this one, for me, on a personal level, I wanted to share a story of reconciliation and try to find intimacy and a soft, hopeful, the power of love, you know, whether you read Erich Fromm or you listen to the Beatles, that there is that energy in the world too. And art can have a radical position by stating that there is a possibility to meet and listen to the other. And that's a powerful thing. So, you know, yeah, tenderness is the new punk.
Welcome to Zinemaldiaren podcast, the audio inventory of some of the events taking place at the San Sebastián Film Festival.
This will be a conversation that I will be conducting, but at one point I will open to the audience so you can ask him all the questions you want to know. So as you may know, Joachim has directed 6 feature films already. The first one, Reprise, was his debut film, and it was premiered in Toronto and Sundance and many other film festivals. Then you made Oslo 31st of August, which established him as a very important director in the European cinema. He went to Cannes for the first time, with that one. Then you did Louder Than Bombs, which was your first film in the US. And that you went into competition in Cannes with that one. Then you made a genre movie, Selma, which was a shift. We can talk about that. Then it was the first worst person in the world, right? Which, not only you went into Cannes, but you won awards there, and you went also to the Oscars, so it was a huge success. And then finally, Sentimental Value, which won the Grand Prix in Cannes this year, and that you might have seen it here in San Sebastián. Yesterday was the premiere. So. My first question for you is regarding Reprise. I'm going to ask you something first, which is very basic, but I love to hear it from filmmakers, which is what made you become a filmmaker in the first place?
Wow, thank you. Thank you all for coming, by the way. It's good to see so many people. I'll try to make sense. I grew up in a film family. My grandfather on my mother's side was a filmmaker. He was a director. His name was Erik Løken. And he made kind of experimental films. He did a film, he was a jazz musician, and he made a film in 1960 called The Hunt, Jakten, which went to the main competition in Cannes at the time, which was a big deal because there wasn't really a film community in Norway. He thought it was what he called jazz movie, and the French called it nouvelle vague, and he was very proud. So, but the infrastructure of creating films in Norway wasn't really in place, so he only made one more feature film 10 years later called Remonstrance, Motforestilling, which was kind of an experimental film where all the 5 reels, when you project films on film, celluloid, usually there's 5 or 6 reels in a feature. And he constructed it so that the 5 reels could be shown in any order and still make sense as a movie. So no one saw that film, but I think it's great. So I think I grew up, and my father is a sound designer, and my mom did a lot of documentaries and also worked a bit in movies. So I was, as a child, very aware that movies was something. I was very privileged in the sense that they showed me a lot of movies. So for me, who's sort of a half dyslexic, didn't love school, restless person, for me, the possibility of doing something like making films seemed like a fun thing as a child. And then at some point in my mid-late teens, I'd made a lot of skateboard films. I was a skater. And then suddenly I realized that, hey, I want to try to do this professionally and do something with fiction. And I remember having a weekend at our house when my siblings and my parents were away for some reason, and I went to the video store and rented all of David Lynch's films on VHS again. I'd seen them all, but I saw them during one weekend and had this feeling that everything is possible in cinema. And I remember the next week I spoke to some friends and I said, I think I want to be a filmmaker. And they laughed and said, yeah, we knew that. Didn't you know? And I was, but it's the embarrassment of saying, I want to be a director, which to me is such a big thing in a way. But when I look back at it, it is a natural progression of just filming. And I think the wonderful thing now, and maybe I was one of the first generations who could, because of video cameras and stuff, film from my childhood and onwards. Whereas now, my children, my 4.5-year-old, we're already making animation films on an iPhone. So now I think that is a more natural thing. That just making films is like drawing or something. And I think that's a good thing.
Nice. So going to your first film, Reprise, it was a huge success for a debut film. So how did it impact you, and how did you receive all the success, and how this impact in choosing Oslo 31st of August to be your second feature?
Yeah. To make Reprise took a long time, and since I was in my late teens, one of my best friends was Eskil Vogt, who I have ended up co-writing with all of the feature films, and also several short films that I did previously. So we worked on Reprise for many, many years, and I had this kind of deal with myself that I'd gone to film school in London, and I'd made some shorts, but I didn't want to... There was kind of a system in the old days, which is now broken, and maybe that's for the better. But there was like, you had to shoot a couple of short films on 16 millimeter. You had to work with a real crew. You had to have achieved some awards to be able to go to the Norwegian Film Institute and apply and say, hey, I want to make a feature film. There was like some process that you had to go through almost to be accepted, I think. And we spent a long time trying to really make this screenplay good. And I think we wrote Reprise 3 or 4 times over again as a training exercise, Eskil and I, just to get to that draft, which was actually our first feature. And it took time. But the truth was that we had started doing... after the short films, I still lived in London. I'd stayed there for a while after film school, and I thought I was going to make an international kind of genre movie. I wanted to do, in a strange way, kind of what Christopher Nolan has done. I you know, with admiration for him and everything, but I didn't know who he was at the time. He hadn't made any films, so there wasn't a Christopher Nolan. I wanted to be the guy that made genre suspense thrillers with like Alain Resnais intellectual structuring of time layering and all that stuff. That's what Eskil and I wanted to do. And we couldn't make it work. We couldn't make that script work. We felt lost. It was a deep crisis. And then I realized that I actually cared more about characters. So we started writing Reprise as a reaction to, you know what, we'll work on this big, important American project, but we're just going to try something in Norway, and we can hide it for the world, you know, if it doesn't work. And we started making film, having ideas about our friends and life and being young, friendship, creativity, the impossibility of love lives, you know, like all the shit you go through in your 20s. So Reprise came as a reaction out of a crisis, and I'm very happy we made that as the first film, because I learned a lot about working with great actors, and it felt very personal in a way I hadn't expected when I was in film school. And then I had another crisis, and that's the second part of your question, because then that film was distributed in the US by Miramax, and had a journey which we were way beyond our expectations. Remember, I come from Norway, 5.5 million people, a very small language area. With not a really great cinema tradition, to be quite frank. I think there's been some great films being made, none of which have been recognized, at least internationally, you know. So that my first film was distributed was a big deal for me. I didn't expect that. So I went to the US, I got an agent, I went to all the studios, they sent me scripts. I think in the following 2 years I read something between 50 or 70 screenplays. And some of them were very seemingly, high-level productions with actors attached, but I felt completely lost. There was like nothing there for me. And so I started writing Louder Than Bombs, which became the third film. That also took a long time because it was in English. And then after 5 years, 4 years, I still hadn't done my second feature. And in Norway, there's this tremendous weight on the second feature. When I did Reprise, 80% of directors only did one film. So there was a very little, like, yes, you did a film, but to do the next one was the big task, huh? And then Oslo, August 31st, was kind of a panic reaction that Eskil and I had, where we said, we'll make a film in 1 year to prove to ourselves we can actually do a quick one, like really fast. And the energy of that, I thought, was really inspiring.
In fact, it was. I think it was for many of us here. It was a very impressive film, and it actually gave you a lot of success. And after that, as I said, it established you as a important European director. And after that, you finally did Louder Than Bombs. You went to the US, and you worked with Isabelle Huppert, you worked with Jesse Eisenberg, Albert Byrne, and everything. And how was it for you? Because as I heard now, it was something that you wanted to do as your second feature, but it was your third, and you wanted from the beginning to be an American movie with American actors or international actors?
Because people wanted me to direct in the US, I thought that, okay, let's write our own thing. I went back to Eskil, which is the most wonderful thing I know, is to sit with him and create something together from scratch. In the meantime, the financial crisis of 2008 had happened, and the film industry changed. I know there's some industry people, so I hope I don't bore you all by going into the details, but these things matter, how does it change? So what happened was that all the big studios in Hollywood in the late 90s, early 2000s had like an independent division. You had Warner Independent, you had Paramount Vantage. Many of these don't exist anymore. There was a moment in the 90s when music and culture and cinema, everybody wanted indie, Nirvana was suddenly the biggest band in the world for a moment there. So everyone was looking for the new, hip, edgy, underground thing and elevating it. But after the financial crisis of 2008, that went away. So it turned out like the American industry wasn't ready for I need Final Cut. I've had it since film one. To me, it's a moral implication of taking responsibility for what the actors give a director. Mm-hmm. If they show their emotions, their bodies, whatever we create in a movie, that I carry the responsibility of what they bring to the final product. And no one that could sit in some studio capacity and invest money should decide that, in my opinion. That's not how art is made. So that was tough to get a film financed at that time that had a more experimental structure like Louder Than Bombs. So that's also actually a European financed film. We had some American support and some great producers that supported it, but it was made out of Oslo, Norway, and with collaboration with France as well. So I only work in the European financing system my whole career, and I'm super happy about it, and it's given me a platform to express myself very freely that is constantly under political threat, because people, right-wing political movements, are always trying to diminish the idea of soft money support for the arts across most countries in Europe. And, it's very important that we have a system that protects free expression through the arts. It's a synthetic thing. It's not something that just happens out of pure capitalism. And no, we need support. Most art has always been supported by someone with an intention of not just making money, but supporting expression and artistic endeavors. Art history shows it. If there's suddenly rich people that have money to spend on paintings, you have a revolution in painting. I'm sorry, these things depend on each other. So this system has really been supporting me, and I know many distributors around Europe. And on top of that, and I'll stop my political spiel and get off my soapbox, but I think it's important to just also be aware that there are incentives to distribute films between our cultures. So that when I'm sitting with Eskil in Norway, we have grown up on watching Pedro Almodóvar's films. And what we like about him is the feeling that he has a universe, which is his, with characters and actors and the feeling of smell and color that's specific, like no one else does. And I don't want to see him, when I was growing up, I didn't want to see him go to LA and do a heist movie. That's not his thing. If he did, it might be marvelous, you know. But I'm kind of glad he stayed with his universe and experimented within that. So that's what I grew up with, the idea of the European auteur. That's and so Louder Than Bombs to me. I know people gave me a hard time at Cannes that year. Oh, it's in English, it's kind of a bit sellout. But I shot it exactly the same way. I was on set with actors that I felt great trust with. Many of the team were also people I worked with before in Europe. So to me, that's a personal film too.
Great. I was going to ask you about Eskil and about your relationship with him, who has been your co-writer for all of your films. How do you work together, and how is your process with him, and in writing in general? How?
The process is very free. It depends from project to project. Sometimes there's been an idea maybe that I had or we shared together from the beginning. But sometimes it's also been going from the blank page. Like Sentimental Value was, again, getting into the room and spending the time together and having a crisis. Every film comes out of this deep feeling that we will fail and we don't have anything to tell. Most of the time, it's continually this anxiety, and then at least to speak for myself, I stop sleeping well at night and I panic, and out of that panic comes a kind of a grounding experience of feeling that I get in touch with what at the moment is important for me to talk about in a movie, and images and ideas and characters come up. And Eskil and I are such good friends that we can share this kind of anxious, self-deprecating moment and get out of it together as friends. And I think for me, film is about collaboration. You know, it's about. I was a punk drummer, and I got kicked out of the band. I wasn't good enough. You know, I'm still yearning for that collaborative feeling of being a part of something with other people. I admire writers who can sit alone and write, but that's not how I work. And Eskil is someone who we have two things happening in every process, which is, on one hand, we are film lovers. We really care about the form of the format, and we can talk about that to get through the day when we don't feel we're very creative. So we always focus on film and music. So yeah, we'll talk about George Cukor or a Godard movie from the 80s that he had seen, and then I see it the next day, or like weird, like all kinds of things. And then also life, that we dare be open and emotional with each other about what we struggle with or what we see people in our lives struggle with. And I think those two elements is what creates the movies we do. Mm-hmm. It's the love for cinema and personal stuff.
Great. I wanted to ask you about casting. You have worked with some actors that you have been working with them for several films, for example, Anders or Renate. By the way, Renate is in the room. I don't know where you are. Say hi.
Stop ett ögonblick, min vän.
So how... So I wanted to ask you, do you write sometimes with her or with others in mind? And also, how's your process with them in terms of, do you rehearse a lot? Mm-hmm. How you do the preparation? And also during the shooting, how's your work with actors?
Yeah, thank you. That's a big question in a way. First of all, writing for someone, I didn't in the beginning because I knew no one. But then I met Anders for the first film, and then he was absolutely a part of doing a film in a year. I knew that we had the Oslo, August 31st, we had a book we based it on, Pierre Trier, La Rochelle, La Feu Follet. And we also knew we had Anders, and we had a city, and some other ideas of how to twist that story a bit different than the novel. So it was absolutely written for Anders. And ironically, on that film, I met Renate, who plays, I gave you one line of dialogue. Do you remember the line?
Let's go to the party.
Let's go to the party. And the profound depth of how you delivered that line shuttled us into a process of 3 movies. No, but it's again the collaborative thing that I knew. Worst person in the world. We were friends, and I knew that. I mean, it sounds terrible. I'm going to talk about you as material now, my friend. But material, a place, a light situation in a place. Where is the sun on that street in the morning, or what happens when Renate can't hide something and she blushes? You know, events. That's the best material for movies. So if I can, Eskil and I are like, we're not like, oh, we're great storytellers. You know, I don't have that inclination of the story. That's like, okay, you need kind of a sense of a story or in the plot to create a structure of moments that you want to film, events, an event of a place, an event of light, and the human event, which is at the center of everything. But so to have someone you want to write for is incredibly inspiring. So Worst Person in the World, absolutely written for Renate, and the same with Sentimental Value. You were the first in. I knew that, okay, I want to work with a character that I had an idea about that she could do, and at least I have that in that room of anxiety and doubts. At least we have a great actor in the middle of it, and that inspires me.
That's so nice.
I didn't say something about rehearsal. I have a feeling, I see quite a few young faces, and I imagine maybe some people that maybe make movies, and as me, and I'm endlessly curious about process, so I think I should just share something about, you asked the question about rehearsal, which to me is very important. If that's okay, I'll take a moment.
Please.
For me, a rehearsal in movies is very important, because what happens is you're constantly struggling with the financial parameters being limited. Less so now that I made a few films. I feel very, lucky and privileged to have more time. But having said that, on the first films I did, because the budgets were so low, I created an honest conversation with everyone, like, hey, the DP, we got to spend the summer going around looking at all the locations and finding our shots before we get on set, because we got to move quick when we shoot. So maybe not going to get paid so much, but do you want to do that? And my great friend that I went to film school with, Jakob Era, the cinematographer, said, yeah, let's do that. And the same with actors in the early films. Now we all get paid a bit more when we have rehearsals, and we're very happy that the producers are paying for that. But in the beginning, it was something we did for free, just to make sure we created the best possible script and trust. Those are the 2 things. I don't look for perfect scenes in rehearsals. I try to get to know the actors. They put their ideas into the script and share this scene, I don't understand, maybe this, maybe that. And we film it, and Eskil does some notes and rewrites some stuff, and we're on the phone and we're stressed. And did you see that take when Renate said something much better? Let's put that in the script instead. And we have this moment when all the actors can come with some input. Usually the structure of the scene is pretty similar, but maybe we drop some lines, maybe something else comes up, and maybe I discover that I don't need so much dialogue. The whole process is trying to get rid of dialogue, because the actors are great. So when Renate comes in, sits down, she doesn't have to say, I'm really angry today. It's like, I feel it. She's angry today. So, so I think rehearsals is, and then trust, that they see that I really dig them. I never cast an actor that I'm not a fan of. All the amateurs, all the children, all the people that come in, I meet them, we spend a long time casting, and I gotta dig them, because the moment they're in front of the camera, even if it's just a small moment, they are the lead of the film in that moment, and you have to sustain the level, So you know what I mean? So if you look at like Martin Scorsese's gangster movies, all the gangsters are great. That's, every film has to have that level. So that takes time. It really takes time. And then trust. For actors to achieve something, my job is not to say the smart thing all the time. It's to try to sit next to the camera and show them love. It sounds cheesy, but it is. Really, like, I love what Renate does. And it's beyond what I expect. And if I'm not open to that possibility of the unexpected, we won't create something that has life. And she knows it, and I know it, and we're terribly nervous in the morning. We drink coffee, and oh shit, yeah, this scene is difficult. Yeah, I know, but you got it. Like, it's just trying to support Renate and the other actors so they can take a chance. And maybe we do some takes where they show their technical brilliance, which they also have often. Renat is a very technically skilled actor. You train in theater. You know how to do your moves. And sometimes that's great for a scene. But then we do the jazz takes towards the end. Or maybe the first one. You already, because you know me now, so you go straight to the chaos. And you're like, you try something and it moves me. And we don't have to discuss it after that. It shows up in the film. And we still wonder what happened in that moment. And you did it, and I don't know how. And all I try is to like create trust so that you can take a chance and not feel like an idiot. And to show like the directorial position is so often this man of power that says, we'll go over there. You know, this is macho bullshit. And I feel the opposite. I feel like, yes, I will have to lead the team and make up my mind and be quick and move forward. But ultimately, it's a humble position of just gratitude, like, okay, we're going to try this thing, and we could fuck it up. I know, but I believe in you. It's that moment. That's the thing. That's what matters. So, and that's also a big discussion in cinema. Why the I mean, yes, outside of set, we got to do a lot of fighting to help the producers get the money and to make sure no one steps on our creativity, all that bullshit. But on set, we have to really try to be humble towards the actors. That's my ideal, at least.
And that's when magic happens many times. So I know that you're a music lover. Actually, I saw you as a DJ and at a party in Cannes. It was the closing ceremony of the La Semaine de la Critique.
Yeah, you were there.
I was presenting a film there, and I thought at the DJ. I looked at the DJ and I thought, this is Joachim Trier DJing.
That's why the music was so bad.
No, I was like, okay, so he's a DJ. So then I started like checking on your scores and the music you put in films, and everything made sense. What is the music for you in general in your life, in particular also in your movies? How do you work with music?
Yeah, so we listen to a lot of music while we write, and sometimes that music is just for inspiration, and sometimes it ends up in the film. And I think both my father and my mother's father were jazz musicians when they were younger. So I grew up in a household with a lot of different types of music from around the world, and I feel grateful for that. So music is tricky in movies because in a way you want your film to be music itself. So you can kill the film by putting on the wrong music so emotional music is dangerous because it can emphasize and lock down the possibility for interpretation. But the right kind of music can open up a sense of interpretation and space for emotions that are bigger than just Renat is sad, the music is sad, it's all sad, and then you like lock it down. Maybe there's a contrapunct, like a contradictory way of using music, or just to create energy. I mean, I love. So, for example, in Paul Thomas Anderson's new film, One Battle After Another, which many of you, I'm sure, will see when it comes out now. I was lucky enough to see it early. It's a really great film, but it's like feeling that you're in like music. The movement, the temperament of that film to me is like a piece of music. It has music, but it's not music that kills the vibe of the mise en scène, the movement of the camera. And I really, again, I'm the punk drummer that got kicked out of the band. I wish I was a musician on some level, but I'm not. So to try to achieve the emotional openness of musicality through movement in space and time, that's really what cinema at its best could be. I like that. I am... My taste is that directors where you feel the gaze of movement or the approach to humans and spaces that has a specific temperament. And that's really hard to describe. The best example that going back to the main inspiration of David Lynch, everyone who sees David Lynch's work, and we grieve him, we miss him. There's not going to be another David Lynch film. The world has lost an important piece of that made sense to us because David Lynch had a vibe, a mood, a place which we love to enter into, and that has to do with his approach to the world. And there's a temperament, I think, music is about temperament. Cinema is also about temperament. millions of small decisions that seduce us into a place that's a different place, yet it's also similar to our world. I think that is what I care about the most in movies. So when I think of a film I love, I don't remember the story. I remember moments and feelings of images and spaces and stuff. A bit like memory in my life as well. If you think of an important moment when something happened, like you broke up with someone you love, you don't it's not the date or the complete linearity of the conversation or the night or the morning after or whatever, but it's the spatial condensation of something. That's at least how my memory works. And that is something that the art of cinema can do something about, that vibey feeling of a space and the human experience in that space, the movements of humans. Very often we talk about, Renata and the other actors as well, about true movements. It's not about achieving only reality, but it's that the consequence of the scene has true movements in them. The timing, the feeling of the character. Because if the character has the autonomy to do something that has some life in it, it doesn't matter if you're doing a sci-fi or a social realist drama, whatever. It's something human that we can interpret. Not always understand, but we can feel the truth of it in its inexplicable quality. And that's the ideal of art, isn't it? That there is specificity enough to get involved, yet there is space enough to interpret. So the clarity, unclarity, the told and the untold, that thing to me is the important thing. And so the clarity of storytelling that we often are told in film school is like the essence of it. That's not my thing, I realize.
For example, in Sentimental Value, you just talk about space and time, and you use the element of the house in order to explain space and time. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? How you use these elements?
On a practical level, like again, you set up patterns of themes in a movie, I think, and a big theme in Sentimental Value is about the reconciliation between children and parents. And realizing, Renata's character particularly, Nora, realizing that Stellan Skarsgård's character, Gustav, the father, there's limited time for them to figure out their relationship. And so having the almost a childish idea of the house looking back at the human endeavors and their space and the limitation of time, that was a good way to set up the story, I think, thematically. So your intro, you have to like tell people a bit, this is thematically what we're going to discuss and talk about or feel something about. So the house was a framework for that. And also it's just a puzzling thing that we all have periods of homes. Maybe we lived in several homes, or maybe there was one particular childhood home, a house, an apartment where we had all the feelings of seasons changing and emotional events all occurring on the stage of that place. And so that place carries a sense of our memories. And that's just, I think, that's what I talk to my 4.5-year-old daughter about. It's stuff like that, the fundamentals of like memory and time. And like, we care about that fundamentally. And film can play with that specifically, different than other art forms. It has its own way of dealing with that. So in this film, I could try to use that aspect of house and memory in a specific way.
In Sentimental Value again, Stellan his character is a film director who cannot connect with his children, his own daughters. Do you believe that cinema is a tool to connect with others? This is a theme that you are exploring?
Yeah, I think it is. I grew up watching movies in rooms like this. I learned about the human behavior and things that no one could say specifically. I was able to experience and observe in movies. And it's a different language. It's just, we have many. I don't speak French, but I learned one dichotomy. Maybe there's a Spanish version of the langue, parole et langue. So it's like speaking language and language as a structure. And language as a structure obviously is much grander. It's way beyond our comprehension. But the spoken language has cultural implications and limitations, and it just doesn't work. So cinema is another, as other art forms have their own versions of this. I believe that, and I'm not talking about changing the world or anything. I mean, that's not the discussion we're having, but the fact that you can, to put it like this, in all the films that we've made, I have met people that have seen them and come to me, strangers, and come to me and shared things and conversations that were on a much deeper level than I expected, and I'm grateful for that. So something must have been transferred in the movie, and that to me is a point of making art.
And in Cannes, when you started promoting the film, you said this sentence that I loved to hear, that is tenderness is the new punk, and I wanted you to explain a little bit more, and I completely agree, and I think the world needs much more of that. And you just said we're not here to change the world, but maybe we can add some hope to the world nowadays.
That would be wonderful, wouldn't it, at this time, if we can contribute to that. I think I come from Norway. It's a very it's a culture with a lot of shame. It's a Protestant culture traditionally, and I think I was in the 90s and early 2000s. I grew up with subculture. I didn't think that the grown-ups knew what they were doing, and I still don't. And I thought a lot of the time the energy of rebellion and provocation and irony were the energies that exposed, again, how language doesn't work and how power structures reoccur again and again that are false and we're being told that are true. And my position has always been an outsider to that. I think many of us feel that. So I grew up in punk, in a way, in the counter position. And I'm realizing now, having children, small children, and feeling quite hopeless about many things in the world and feeling incapable of knowing how to deal with the brutal polarization and aggressive climate of discourse, for example, that I completely understand the need to scream and be fucking angry. I get it. But for this one, for me, on a personal level, I wanted to share a story of reconciliation and try to find intimacy and a soft, hopeful, the power of love, whether you read Erich Fromm or you listen to the Beatles, that there is that energy in the world too. And art can have a radical position by stating that there is a possibility to meet and listen to the other. And that's it. But again, now the film is done and I'm pretending I had a plan. It's just, you do the best you can. And this is what came up in Eskil and me when we wrote it. And with the actors, we talked about it a lot. I thought Inga, who plays your younger sister in the film, Agnes, she's so wise and clear in her statements. And she said in an interview we did together recently, like, to me, this story is about the power of love, she said. And I was like, wow, like the old punk in me was like, I wouldn't dare say that, but she's right. That's what we were talking about, is that they actually really love each other, and that's a powerful thing. So, tenderness is the new punk.
Let's close with this. Thank you so much. And now we open for the audience to make all the questions you want.
Hello? Okay. I just wanted to say that I saw the movie Sentimental Value yesterday, and I really, really love it. I'm still
Thank you.
processing it, but I felt what you have just said, that you transferred something to a stranger like me with that film, and I wanted to say thank you for doing that film, and also the worst person in the world. And thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. That's I said something after we had a big applause at Cannes, which moved us very much, and we were also a little bit shy. I quoted Buñuel, another Spanish filmmaker. I make films for my friends, and I feel that that's my kind of dream, that you can feel close to someone through art. So thank you for sharing that.
Hi. So I really love the film. I saw it yesterday, and I had a question. In the film, you talk a little bit about how being a director and having children are something that sometimes it can be like difficult. Like in the film, he wasn't a great parent because he was directing films. And in a conversation with the daughter, he's saying like, you should have children, like you should have someone to love. And she's thinking it's not really that easy, like being a great actress and having children. And I wanted to ask you, like, how has it been for you? I know you're a parent, and how do you think it relates?
Thank you. I think often in films we create questions that we wonder ourselves or that we've felt in our life. To start with the film, I think that Gustav Borg's problem is bigger than just being a lot at work. I think he's a man who's incapable of an emotional closeness, an emotional language that somehow has been hindered or stopped in his life. That could be a comment on a generation, but I think most of all I always focus on the individual in the story. So I think that's his biggest problem. I mean, you're asking a big question. I think if you look at it rationally, the world is not a super great place. We're on the brink of an environmental catastrophe. Economy is not, going great most places. So I have a lot of friends who are scared of having kids for that reason. I'm not going to enter into that conversation because I'm a humanist. Humans are not going to be on the earth forever. But for now, we should keep making them if we can and want, right? So we got to be optimistic. So for me, I was longing to have children, but also there's something really interesting and beautiful about, at least in Norway, I'm going to keep it local because it's difficult to make grand statements. In Norway, we have had a lot of progression about female directors over the last, I would say, 15 years, 20 years. And that has been great for us male directors too, because we have gotten a focus on good set culture, where the macho energy is lessened, and the sense that we need different cultures on set. So it's all not just tough guys, but also in private conversations about balancing being an artist with a lot of demands on you as a director, but also having children. I think actually the feminist discourse around cinema has helped men also allow ourselves a bigger freedom of figuring out open conversations about how we make movies. And on this film is the first film I made while having 2 children. And I have some of my lovely team here today. Amongst them, one of our producers. I have two of our producers are here. And they were, I said going in, I'm really scared of failing as a father. And it's very symbolic to make this film for me, because I don't want to be Gustav Borg, who's always like, well, I'm at work, so I'm away for 5 months, So we shot in Oslo. I could go home every night. And that was a big deal for me. That was one of the big achievements in this film for me too. I think I'm an okay father, even though I'm a film director. But I had children late. I'm being very personal here now. But yeah, it's an important question to ask, because you also want to be a responsible parent, right? There was a beautiful moment when Lars Thomas, who's sitting right here, my oldest daughter did her first theater play, ironically enough, in kindergarten, and we were doing pre-production work, and I was like, I hate to leave, but I think there's a theater play, and we're making a film about an actress and a father, and Lars Thomas is like, just run now, like you don't want to be Gustav Borg. And you sent me home, and I ran to the kindergarten and saw the play and wept because she was great. And anyway, I'm being a bit cheesy here, forgive me, but those things matter. So we gotta, as a film community, help each other have that spirit. The irony is that I was a child on film sets, and in the 80s things were a bit more, I don't know, laid back, and there was a place for me to be with my parents and my grandfather even, on film sets. So I think there's a possibility, and I believe it's doable, if that's an answer to your question.
I wanted to ask you a question about Thelma, because Thelma is a film that really shook me very much. Especially, I was wondering, when you conceived it and when you were writing it, how close were you with psychoanalysis, for example? Because I was talking to a psychoanalyst who was telling me all the stages of, I don't know what, I'm not a psychoanalyst, but she was telling me everything was really there that made it coherent, because so many films claim to be psychological thrillers or things like that, but they have no whatsoever relationship with how things are clinically happening. So did you have any involvement with psychoanalysis, or was it purely from your
Renata's laughing at me now.
or was it purely from the writer or with the actors, or how did that come out into this vision?
Thank you very much, and thank you for mentioning Thelma, which is many people see as a kind of an odd one out, but as all my films feel on some level equally personal. So thank you for that question. The question of psychoanalysis. The term psychoanalysis is complicated because it has certain interpretative limitations, because people think that it's a purely old school Freudian thing. So just to open it up, and I know that's not what you're referring to. You're talking more about the development psychology of humans and the psychodynamic belief that the automation of the child away from the parent, which is what Thelma is about, is a fundamental human experience, and it has neurological implications and psychodynamic implications, and all of that interests me tremendously. I'm really interested in the idea of self and identity, and but in a purely kind of humanist, curious way. I don't sit down and think about it, even though I've read a lot of psychoanalytical theory, and I care about a lot of that, but I think more than anything, it was trying to figure out in that film how some images and ideas that were purely kind of visual and iconic to me, without becoming symbolistic, but as an event, as an occurrence of movement, how that could fit into the story of a young person's development of feeling a connectedness to true will. Telema, I don't know, the occult also plays into this, but the idea of true erotic power of the self, and how that is in contradiction to the restriction of the parent, which is, in this case, in this story, put very almost stylized specifically into a very conservative West Coast Christian context of Norway. And I did a lot of research because I was interested in that culture, and that was scary as hell to see some of those anti-gay, anti-abortion, reactionary, terrible environments for young people to grow up in. That was really in a country which we conceive as liberal and open. And in Oslo, I hadn't encountered those milieus. So that's one thing. But then to try to find the unanimous human interest and experience in a character just finding autonomy, which we're all struggling with continually, I think. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers the psychoanalytical question, but thank you for noticing. That really matters. Thank you. You want to respond? No. Okay. No, thank you. No, I'm glad it shook you. That it was meant to be a bit more emotionally violent, if I could say.
I wanted to ask you a question related to Thelma. What is your link to fantasy? You've mentioned David Lynch, an absolutely fantastic director, Buñuel, Almodóvar, who also have a link with fantasy. I think fantasy is present in all your films, maybe in a more daily way, as fantasy is synonymous of dreams or desires. But in Thelma, it's a much more fantastic film. It's like almost a superhero film. How important is fantasy in your film?
No, it's true. We were trying to go all the way in a way and do. I see it also as my curiosity about cinema is quite vast, and I have periods, and I've watched a lot of giallo and like witch stories from Italian 70s cinema, for example. I find that intriguing. Very often, very physical experience movies, and that was an inspiration for this. And also reading about the occult and stuff, and trying to find dream images. So, in all the films that we've made, I think that we are interested in the mind. The big absence in cinema is the human interior. That's what you cannot show with the camera. Therefore, a virtue for me is to try to see how can we understand the interior life. Is it through a dream sequence? Is it Julie taking mushrooms? Or is it like a pure fantasy of a metaphysical ambiguity like in Thelma? Or is it stream of consciousness montage sequences like we've done in several of our films? Or is it just watching the human face and leaving space for interpretation and having great performers? All of those things to try to engage in internal human experiences of the mind somehow, of consciousness. That I find really intriguing. And so Thelma was a version of that to me, which was more extreme maybe.
In Vilnius Film Festival this year, we'll be screening all of your films. So this year we had a chance to watch your short films for the first time. And we were so surprised. These shorts really stuck with me, and I think they will stick with me for long. So I want to hear your take on short format as in form. Will you ever come back to making shorts, or is it something you've done and will leave in the past? It's just very interesting to hear your take on it.
Great, thank you. All the questions here are great. Thank you. No one asked me about coming back to the short format. And thank you for taking the time to perhaps suffer through my early works. I'm not sure they're all, as I wish them to be, but I'm still proud of them. They're part of my development. So I don't have a plan right now for a short film. It's hard to get them screened. And also when I then do all the work and we are lucky to get the money and to be allowed to do films, it's kind of nice to be with the family for a longer time. A short film you've done in a week shooting it. And I'm trying to get as many days with the actors as possible because I really enjoy it. But sure, those were important developing steps. And they were also me trying to figure out film language and really stretch. And did you see Pietà? Yeah, I think that's my best work. I look at that film, I'm like, how the hell did that kid on 25, I was a complete lost idiot at the National Film School, like, that's really an ambitious piece of work, and I could never do it again. I see that I'm a completely different person now, but I'm proud that I was brave enough to. It's kind of quite pretentious, and I'm doing all like this kind of Alain René tracking shots in black and white, and it's very stylized. And in a very short time, I deal with very big emotions that we don't really earn and build up to and stuff. But still, fuck it, it's got energy. I am proud of that film, so I'm happy you saw it.
Hi, congratulations for the film. I really loved it. And I wanted to ask, as Sentimental Value has a simple narrative core, but after that it has so many layers about the characters, the way they see the world, the other people, cinema and art. So I wanted to ask, how do you work that on the screenplay, and after that with actors and with your own way to shoot those scenes? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a lot.
Yeah.
But thank you for the question. So yes, again, the idea of story. I think that Sentimental Value could be cut down to a very simple kind of 1 hour and 20-minute plot-driven piece. And it's kind of nice to have that structure at the core. But that's not necessarily what I care about. I care about character scenes, human behavior. That's very much in the writing, and it's very much in the performances of the actors. And it's very much about film production and allowing us to have time to explore properly and realize that some of the stuff that ends up in the film is not exactly as planned, yet it's answering the setup of the screenplay. So my job is to try to be attentive every step of the process to the best possibility, knowing that I have a core of some sense of emotion and thematic treatment that I want to develop. And I try early with everyone to get them involved in the primary structure and idea so that they can come back with suggestions, but we're still within the framework of the story or the thematic setup that the proposition of the script has. And the irony is at some point you can kind of let go and it comes back time and time again. And I find that to be very true with the last one, with Sentimental Value, because it's about such kind of simple human experiences of being siblings, being a child, being a parent. It's the kind of so everyone has something in the process, that everyone that works on the film contributed something to that in a good way, I thought.
Hi, it's about the characters as well. I was just wondering, because I genuinely believe that you are one of the best writers when it comes to making your characters and how complex they are and like showing them on screen. And I was just wondering, are these people inspired by any people in your life? Yeah, we're from Norway as well, by the way.
Oh.
So, hey.
Hi. Thank you so much. That's a big compliment. Thank you. It's a lot of different things. Ultimately, like, I think I learned from actors, and I think Eskil as well, who's a wonderful director and has made films on his own that he's written and directed without me. And so we talk a lot about the process of creating character. And we learn from actors that you have to walk in their shoes. You have to ask the subjective question, even in all the characters. So it's a good exercise when writing to, for example, if you have a scene where someone comes in and is a very seemingly small character, you still have to imagine that character getting up in the morning and coming into the room and walking out again, and who are they? And so you can work with the actors of giving it life and complexity, and all characters are only the tip of the iceberg, but you need to see the whole thing. I think that's one thing. Then I think be open to the fact that ultimately you're making documentary films. I am shooting Renate Reinsve on that day in her life. She's pretending to be someone else. We've gone through a process when Renate has kind of taken on the part and the emotional complexity of the character, but she has, because she's a really great actor, become Nora for a while. And it's not like she has to go around with a strange hat and speak dialect, but she can lock in the morning and kind of lose herself in the character, I think. So that's very important. But so it's kind of, it's there in the writing. And of course, I don't think I'm so inspired by saying this character is biographically this or that, but I have to understand, like an actor, who all of them are on the inside. And then the dynamic of the scene. What we call dynamic is really the it's not even the conflict, but the structure of their behavior with each other. Most of the things we do, and then we have some scenes often in the films where people are alone as well. But those are often contextualized by events, and then you see them alone and you kind of understand. Or the alone time is a mystery. And then it's even more important that the character behavior is consistent with something that the actor really feels, because you don't want to look at someone on screen that doesn't have, even if it's a hidden intention, some sense of direction and intention. Everything needs to be specific. That's the thing. Yet, it shouldn't be so clear that it becomes obvious. And that's what we're always working with. That was a complicated answer. I'm sorry. That's the best I can do.
Thank you for sharing. My question is, could you talk about some of your future projects, especially from, I'm based in China, I'm a China producer, so I'm wondering if you have a project, you may want to shoot in China or Asia, because I feel a lot of, the sentimentality and tenderness live really close to the culture and mentality and people there.
Thank you. I don't know what I'm doing next, to be honest with you. I don't. Maybe I should shoot something in China. That would be exciting. I've never been there, so I would love to go. I don't know, honestly. I don't know what I'm doing next. There are small ideas here and there, but nothing that feels firm enough to know what it is yet.
Hi. So you kind of set your whole career on a path wanting to keep Final Cut. Yeah. Essentially rejected a Hollywood path for this particular thing as a moral responsibility. Do you feel the same way about protecting the theatrical window for your films?
Yes, we have so far, and yes. I'm glad and grateful for it. Thanks for this important political and aesthetic question. It's not like I have in my contract the intention of a certain amount of months, but the intention with the producers, with all the distributors we work with, is if it's possible, to as long as possible to keep a film on a big screen and choose rather the distributor, even if they pay a bit less, if we know that they will prioritize the big screen experience. To me, that's essential. That's my dream. And again, maybe it's because I'm older, but I care about that, and I don't give a shit about whether it's fashionable or not, or fuck it. Even if we're like down to very few theaters, I'm still going to go there and watch movies as much as I can, and it will exist. And let's stop talking cinema and movies down, because there's a kind of tabloid trend over the last, I don't know, 15 years that, oh, cinema's dying, and no. There are some economic challenges, and the structure is changing, but actually, at the moment, for personal films made with an intention of a personal contact with the audience, like indie bands back in the day, you know, that's still alive. It's still happening. And that market was never expected to make the biggest amount of money. So it's less vulnerable, one could say. Again, European incentives to see each other's films and incentives around the world. So yeah, that's very important to me. It's a bit of a battle, this thing about making movies, and I think you got to be willing to deal with conflict a lot to be a filmmaker. Are you a filmmaker as well?
I'm a writer.
Yeah, but you write for the screen?
Yeah, I write for the screen. I'm a WGA, but left Hollywood to go to France.
Great,
where there's a bunch of soft money. Good
for you, man.
Yeah.
No. I think I get where you're coming from, and we'll all have to contribute to sustain the theatrical window.
Is there something you think filmmakers can do, like Final Cut is everything? It has to be there. Filmmakers can do to preclude predation by streamers and that type of encroachment on the cinematic experience, because ultimately it comes down to filmmakers more than
it does. It's tricky because I know how vulnerable it is to get your first film off the ground, and I'm not going to sit and talk down to people who didn't manage to get exactly the contractual agreement to have Final Cut. But I will say that it's a bit like a strike, and then you really want everyone to be on board. I'm sorry, it's actually that, and I'm not going to shame people, because it's damn hard to make a film, and many films are made every year where the director didn't have Final Cut, and they're wonderful films. But of course, the best I can do is to keep pushing and talking and working with producers that I never had a resistancy. No one tried to stop me. I worked with wonderful, understanding producers, I must say. But I think there are different ways of arguing for Final Cut, and the tradition is all about a power game. I think what I'm talking about, I talked about earlier, about the moral responsibility towards the cinematographer maybe being away from his or her family for months on end to work on the vision that Eskil and I and me as a director and all the others in the team created together, to have an external power of financial interest come fuck around with that material diminishes the trust between us and the group. There's something about also an editor working with a director and knowing we're going to actually, like I do, show it to a lot of people. I do screenings of the film, different cuts, and take all the shitty comments that it sucks along the way, not because I want it to be commercial, but because I'm yearning for the film to be good and communicate not too much and not too little, find a balance. So when you have Final Cut, you can actually screen more, because no one's going to use the screening against you to take control and stuff like that. So I think it creates trust and freedom. And I would ultimately say that if you look at film history, a lot of the films that have commercially worked have also been made by very often directors that are deeply involved in the script process, deeply involved in the editing, and has had a sense of control. And the achievement of personal expression is at the core of also some of the most successful films financially. So I've often said this. I think my approach to working with actors and shielding, protecting, loving, nourishing them is how producers and financiers should work with directors. Don't employ directors unless you really want to support them and love them and help them. And also writers and editors. You know, don't you want as a producer to say, I think this director did his or her best work when I produced? Like I want Renata to do well. I want her to do something wonderful. I'm proud of Renata as a director. I think that financiers should feel like that with directors and creative team.
I think we have to wrap up, they told me. Or do we have one more question? Do you know? No? We don't? Okay. No tenemos. Pues nada, thank you so much, Joachim.
Thank you.
Thank you.